Hello, in this next podcast we're learning about growth strategies, and our learning target is that we will learn the adaptive value of different growth strategies. First, we'll start off with a quick review of some things we learned in the last podcast. We learned about two particular growth strategies. One was for R selected species, and these tend to have exponential growths. And exponential means that the size just keeps doubling and doubling. They grow very, very rapidly. K-selected species tend to have logistical growth, and that is a J curve where they tend to grow much more slowly and reach carrying capacity and stay at that carrying capacity. These are the reproductive strategies for both R-selected and K-selected species. I'm not going to go over them one by one because we went over them in the previous podcast, but they're here for you to copy them down if you want. Now for survivorship and life expectancy, here we have some definitions for you. Survivorship is the percentage of a cohort that survives to a certain age. Cohort is a group that's born in the same year. Actually, cohort is something that is important in terms of the report card that our school gets, and in terms of like you all belong to a particular cohort, and those are the people who you enter the school with. And if a student is left back a year, even though they may be, say, a super freshman or a super senior after you graduate, they're still in the same cohort as you, even though they're no longer in the same grade as you. And then there's life expectancy, and life expectancy is the probable number of years of survival for an individual of a given age. And oddly enough, life expectancy increases as age increases. One way you can see this is think of people who you may know who are in their 90s or 100s, and those people actually are much healthier than people who are, say, in their 70s. And that's because people who are unhealthy have died and don't reach to the age of in their 90s. And also within the past 100 years or so, we have found that life expectancy has increased markedly in humans. Like in 1900, the global life expectancy was about 30, which actually it's been about 30 for most of human history. But in 2006, globally, it was 64.3. And it also varies still when you look at different ethnic groups and also different countries. It goes to a low, like in Swaziland, which is in southern Africa, where it's 33, and one of the highest is in Japan, where it's 82. Now we come to survivorship curves. These are idealized curves, and this diagram here could very easily, or something like it, could very easily appear on one of my tests, or it could appear on an AP exam. And I drew in a curve that also appears that's not an idealized one. And this curve that I drew in is what shows for humans in developing countries, because in developing countries there is a high infant mortality, and that brings the number down very rapidly at a young age. And that's what we see there. As you go from left to right in this graph, their age increases. So at a young age in developing countries, lots of infants die. For example, they may get things like smallpox, they may get malaria, they may get malnutrition, they may die of AIDS, all different diseases they may get, and that leads them to die at a very young age. But once adulthood is reached, then they tend to be able to, then death is very uncommon until they get to a very old age, and then there's a sort of like a cliff, where all of a sudden there's a high mortality, very high death rate. Going over these one by one. First, we'll go to a type 1 survivorship curve. This is found in K-selected species. And this type of thing, you see how it stays basically at a level rate for most of life. That means that there's a very low juvenile mortality, and this is found in humans in developing countries. Like think about this. Here in the United States, this is what we find here because we are a developed country. Look around the classroom. If there are people who you've grown up with, they've pretty much all survived. If someone who's living in the United States back when we were a developing country, back, say, the 19th century, that was not true. And with this in a type 1 survivorship curve, these types of populations have few offspring, but there's also lots of parental care for those few offspring. And type 1 survivorship is found in species like humans, in developing countries, developed countries, like I said, also in large mammals and large predators. Type 2 survivorship curves, their death is random. It could be due to something like poison, it could be due to accidents, and these are found in some lizards, it's found in quite a few birds, it's found in rodents. Type 3 survivorship curve, these are in R-selected species, and just picture trees. And you see how trees have lots and lots of seeds, lots of fruits, and the fruits all have lots of seeds. That's a very, very high birth rate. And obviously, lots of those, most of those seeds never come to trees. Most of those seeds just don't come to anything. So there's a very, very high infant mortality. But for those few that manage to survive to adulthood, those few individuals will survive all the way to ripe old age. And these types of individuals, these types of species tend to be insects, they tend to be shellfish, and also trees. Now we come to population distribution. And population distribution, I don't think this is in the textbook, but it's found in other textbooks. And they're basically three types of population distributions. There's clumped, and for that, this actually is our type distribution if you think about it. Humans tend to be clumped into urban areas. And if you go one state where you really see this would be something like Nevada, where practically the entire population is clumped into Las Vegas. Go elsewhere in the state and you can drive and see almost nobody. So, and this is usually, clumped is actually the most common among most species, and their populations are arranged around a limited resource. Should be, or let's say limiting or limited resource. The next one is an even distribution, and an even distribution occurs when the individuals compete for space. Like you see here, I think those are creosote bushes, which is what you see in a desert. And then there's random, and random occurs when the resources that they need are found throughout an area, and the individuals, and also the individuals do not strongly influence where individuals will settle. Now we come to our concluding questions. Number 1, define survivorship. Number 2, define life expectancy. Number 3, which survivorship curve would a rabbit follow? Number 4, which survivorship curve would an elephant follow? Now the last two questions here, you don't have to ask yourself which one is a rabbit, what kind of thing is a rabbit, which kind of thing is an elephant. Rabbits and elephants are both mentioned in the podcast. If I didn't say it myself, you'll find rabbits and elephants displayed in the podcast. So that concludes this podcast, and I'll see you in class tomorrow.